Hey guys, this is Justin. Hello and welcome to another video. Today we'll be returning to our Ask X series. Star Wars is slow, so I'm letting you guys drive the bus right now. If you've got a question you'd like to see me answer in a future video, of course, leave it down in the comments. Today we have, do you think the Separatists could have won the Clone Wars if Palpatine wasn't in control? Now, this is a bit of a weird question considering the Clone Wars were essentially a creation of Palpatine. So without Palpatine's presence, it's hard to imagine really how things would have gotten started or progressed, but we could still make some assumptions about the general capabilities of both the Galactic Republic and the Confederacy of independent systems. Just note though, even these assumptions are pretty weird because the Confederacy is probably not able to build up the manufacturing capacity to build these weapons of war, nor do they desire to without Palpatine's influence, nor does the Republic have any sort of military without it being commissioned in secret by the Sith. And I do just briefly want to touch on the state of the galaxy, and we'll start with something I mentioned a couple of videos ago, which a couple of people in the comments questioned quite respectfully, and that was the fact that the Trade Federation had among the most powerful ships in the galaxy because they used loopholes essentially to skirt the Ruusan reformations. Some pointed out to me that, well, technically, yes, they did have powerful vessels, it was simply because they were suffering through piracy. However, when you look at Plagueis, specifically chapter 22, you can see that Palpatine engineers the entire situation as a means to create discord within the galaxy. The arming of the freighters is controversial, and it's also a political strike against Chancellor Valorum. He uses that, then later orders a Lucrehulk blockade of the planet Naboo, but that's neither here nor there. If we're imagining a situation where the Clone Wars somehow happens, maybe Palpatine is killed, could the CIS have won if we pick up, say, between episodes 2 and 3? Well, I think the answer quite clearly is yes. So, put simply, the Confederacy of Independent Systems is a self-sustaining faction in a small portion of space made up of several megacorporations with the backing of systems. The Republic, on the other hand, is what most see as the legitimate institution throughout most of known space. Prior to the Clone Wars, it had no standing military, rather relied on a decentralized military which saw individual systems providing for their own protection and policing, with of course the help of the Jedi and a very, very small judicial force. During the Clone Wars, for some reason the Republic thought it would be a good idea, I mean I guess their back was against the wall, to accept millions of advanced clone troopers grown in secret alongside a pretty much ready-made military. The biggest thing about the Confederacy to me is that it never feels like they're really operating to their full potential, and there's even some material in the expanded universe which touches on this. Clones in some of the Republic Commando books think about how something is a bit fishy and how there should be an order of magnitude or more droids on the battlefield than we see. And that I think is the main weakness of the Republic versus the Confederacy: attrition. The Republic, I guess, was in a state of total war, but they didn't have the resources, nor I think the willingness to completely transition their society into full-scale wartime production. Like we see, much of their forces come from the existing reserves ready in secret before the war. And there's also the issue that Republic clone troopers just aren't easily replaceable. You can't pop them off the assembly line. You have to grow them, and it takes at minimum a decade, even with the accelerated training. Now, in Star Wars Legends, and I do want to touch on this, there were ways that you could make up for this with faster cloning methods. Obviously, you could also use conscripts, but still, there was no way for the Republic to match and replace soldiers at the rate the CIS was doing. The interesting thing about the Confederacy is that these were massive corporations completely ready to flip a switch and go fully into war production, making starships, battle droids, tanks, anything. You can argue about the effectiveness of each military, and obviously the average clone trooper is many times more effective than a single battle droid, but I think this is why, even with the serious difference in held territory with the Republic versus the Confederacy, that Kalani thought the Republic had less than a third chance of beating the Separatists. And the CIS's decline in the last year of the Clone Wars was largely engineered by Palpatine. The Battle of Coruscant would end up being a disaster, and that of course was totally engineered by Palpatine, both to strike fear in the heart of Republic citizens in the core, but also to further turn Anakin to the dark side. I mean, at the very end, he completely deconstructs the CIS, sending the leadership off to Mustafar, only to have them slaughtered. But time and again, we see that Palpatine and by extension Dooku are not always operating in the Confederacy's best interests, rather in their own. own. A good example of this is from the Star Wars Republic comics, where Dooku and Sidious purposely sabotaged what could have been a critical CIS strike on Kamino. That's not the Battle of Kamino in the Clone Wars, it's an earlier battle. In novels like Jedi Trial or the Revenge of the Sith novelization, you can also see more explicitly from the perspective of Count Dooku that he's thinking about after the war and setting individuals up within the military like Grievous to be either failures, scapegoats, or subjects of terror. And I do think if the CIS was waging a war in their best interest, you'd see less outright terrorism, bioweapons, although they would probably still have their use. And we'll get back to that in just a moment. But another way that the CIS was pretty much deliberately neutered was the dropping of successful weapons programs or vehicles. The example that I've always pointed to, and I mentioned this back way in the day when I covered it, was the CIS super tank, but we also have Cortos's battle droids, just the idea of Cortosis generally as a lightsaber deterrent. The thing was, it was always planned to go one way. The CIS was never going to win. They were always being held back, and the end goal was predetermined. They needed to be scary enough to justify the initial batch of clones and further clones, plus also to scare the galaxy into accepting Palpatine's rule. And again, that points to the general difficulty in answering this question. It's sort of nonsense because the CIS wouldn't be held together without Palpatine's will, nor do I think the Republic would have tolerated war for so long. But I mean, if we ignore that, I do think, as mentioned, that the CIS has the ability to simply outgrind the Republic. Now, especially on the ground, I'm a little more concerned about their shipbuilding capabilities. The Republic just has so many large, powerful shipyards which were dedicated to the cause, but politically the Republic was very unstable. So even if they did try to, for example, draft soldiers from the general population, I don't think the Republic could have survived that politically. And especially if you think about what winning the war meant for the CIS, it doesn't necessarily mean toppling the Republic, taking Coruscant, holding it. It simply means that they are able to exist as their own entity. I think the Republic was wrong to even fight that to the degree which they did. Like, they wanted to separate. They wanted to no longer be a part of the Republic. I think a fully untethered CIS, not forced into dumb decisions, just has the personnel, the technology, and the production to at least get that goal, if not outright squash the Republic, which I don't think was ever really their purpose. That, however, is just my opinion. Let me know yours down below.